Hello and welcome to Written Words. I'm Helen, and in this lesson we are going to look at adjective order. So we're going to explore the rule for adjective order. We're going to look at some examples of this from The Hobbit, and we're going to talk about two ways of using adjectives. I have made another video earlier on adjectives, talking about what adjectives are and how to use them. So there is a link to that video in the description below. But in this lesson, we're going to go a little bit further and look at the order in which we use adjectives. There are several memes going around the internet at the moment which point out that there is a particular order for adjectives in English. So I thought I would have a look at that a little more closely. When we use more than one adjective, there is a rule governing the order that we should put them in. If you're a native speaker of English, you probably do this automatically without even realizing, because it just sounds right that way. But it can be more problematic for non-native speakers who are trying to learn this consciously. Why do we say a big black dog? But we never say a black big dog. It just sounds wrong. Why might we wear a new denim jacket? But we would never wear a denim new jacket. It doesn't feel right. So the answer to that is this particular order. It's a rule, but often an unspoken rule, that adjectives should follow this order. So the order is opinion, size, age, shape, colour, origin, material, and purpose. So following this rule, we might have a lovely, big, fresh, golden brown, homemade birthday cake, or an ugly, enormous, old, baggy woolen coat. We might drive a small blue car, but we would be unlikely to drive a blue small car. So let's have a look more closely at a couple of examples. She was wearing a lovely new cotton dress. So we have three adjectives in this sentence: lovely, new, and cotton. Lovely is an opinion. New gives us information about the age of the dress. And cotton is the material. So if we refer back to the list, it does follow the list. There is a very popular film called My Big Fat Greek Wedding. So why are those three adjectives, big, fat, and Greek, in that order? Because big is referring to the size, fat is referring to the shape, and Greek is referring to the origin. So it follows the rule of adjective order. However, in practice, long strings of adjectives are not used very often. Adjectives are useful, but they're best used in conjunction with other, more creative ways of describing. This order of adjectives is an interesting phenomenon, and it is a good idea to be aware of it. But it's not needed as often as you might think. As I was looking through various books to find a suitable extract to illustrate this point, I really struggled to find any passage with more than two adjectives together. Putting lots of adjectives together is not very common, and it's not very good writing practice. As I've said in many videos already, variety makes the writing more interesting. So if you're just using adjectives to describe something in your writing, it can be quite dull. There are other ways to do it. I won't go into too much detail about that for now, because I covered a lot of that in our previous video on adjectives. But I did find a passage in Tolkien's The Hobbit which does contain quite a few adjectives. So let's have a look at the order of those adjectives. In a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit. Not a nasty, dirty, wet hole filled with the ends of worms and an oozy smell, nor yet a dry, bare, sandy hole with nothing in it to sit down or to eat. It was a hobbit hole, and that means comfort. It had a perfectly round door like a porthole, painted green, with a shiny yellow brass knob in the exact middle. The door opened onto a tube-shaped hall like a tunnel, very comfortable tunnel, without smoke, with panelled walls and floors tiled and carpeted, provided with polished chairs and lots of pegs for hats and coats. The hobbit was fond of visitors. The tunnel wound on and on, going fairly but not quite straight into the side of the hill. The hill, as all the people for many miles round called it. And many little round doors opened out of it, first on one side and then on another. No going upstairs for the hobbit. Bedrooms, bathrooms, cellars, pantries, lots of these, wardrobes, he had whole rooms devoted to clothes, kitchens, dining rooms, all were on the same floor and indeed on the same passage. The best rooms were on the left-hand side, going in, for these were the only ones to have windows. Deep-set round windows, looking over his garden and meadows beyond, sloping down to the river. There are a few strings of adjectives in this passage, so let's have a look at what they are. First of all, we have a nasty, dirty, wet hole. Does this follow the rule? Well, nasty is definitely an opinion, but what about dirty and wet? Are they opinions? Is dirty an opinion or a colour? Is wet an opinion, or perhaps it comes under material because it involves water? So the adjectives here are not necessarily easy to fit into these categories. Nasty definitely needs to go first because that's an opinion, but dirty and wet, could we put those the other way around? A nasty, wet, dirty hole? It wouldn't sound horrendous that way round either. Then we have a dry, bare, sandy hole. Well, sandy is definitely material. It's talking about sand that the hole is made out of. Dry and bare, are they opinions? Or are they materials? Or are they something else? So again, you could say a bare, dry, sandy hole. Sandy definitely needs to come last. But dry and bare could be the other way around without causing too much controversy. And then we have a shiny yellow brass knob. This is a little clearer because yellow is definitely a colour and brass is definitely a material. So is shiny an opinion, or is that part of the colour? I think it definitely sounds better this way round, shiny yellow brass knob, than to say yellow shiny brass knob. So perhaps shiny might come under the category of opinion. And there are lots more adjectives in this passage too, but none of them in long strings. Instead, we have other ways of describing as well. Tolkien tells us about the Hobbit's character in ways that don't involve adjectives too. For example, we are told that it was not the kind of hole where there was nowhere to sit down and nothing to eat. So that gives us a little information about this place. It's not the kind of place where you wouldn't feel welcome. And later on we're told there were lots of pegs for hats and coats because the hobbit was fond of visitors. So presence of the pegs for the hats and coats tells us something about this hobbit without using adjectives. He's catered for lots of visitors by putting up lots of pegs for hats and coats, which tells us he must be a very sociable, a very gregarious hobbit. We also know that he must like food because there are lots of pantries. And we also know that he likes clothes. He must have a large collection of clothes because he had whole rooms devoted to them. And we also know that he likes his garden because the best rooms in the house have windows looking out onto it. So although there are a lot of adjectives in this passage, there are a lot of other ways that Tolkien has used to depict this character that don't involve adjectives too. For our language focus, let's just have a little look at two different ways that adjectives are used. most of the examples we've looked at so far in the lesson have involved attributive adjectives. But there is also another way to use adjectives, which we call predicate adjectives. The attributive adjective goes before the noun in the sentence. So it goes in front of the word that it's describing, the thing, the noun, the thing, the person, the object that it is describing. For example, the blue dress. The dress is what we're talking about, and blue is the adjective describing it, so we put blue in front of dress. A delicious meal. The meal is what we're talking about. Delicious is the adjective describing it, so we put delicious in front of meal. The predicate adjective, however, goes with a linking verb, and that's often the verb to be. And the predicate adjective describes the subject of the sentence. So, for example, her dress is blue. So that's a whole sentence in its own right. Her dress is the subject of the sentence. Is the verb, and then the adjective is added on the end after is. Blue. The meal tasted delicious. The meal is the subject of the sentence, but it's also what is being described. Tasted is the linking verb, and delicious is the adjective added on the end to explain what the meal was like. And now for our writing prompt. Here is a sentence describing a UFO sighting. A metallic, oval-shaped, enormous, strange, silvery grey object appeared in the sky. First of all, have a look at the adjectives in brackets there and see if you can put them in the right order. Then when you've done that, have a go at rewriting that scene to make it more interesting. Play around with language. Vary the structures you're using. And use that variety to bring the scene to life. As usual, there is a worksheet to accompany this lesson, and worksheets can be downloaded in packs of 10 lessons from our website at writtenwords.uk. If you enjoy doing the writing prompts in the lessons, I also have a book called A Month of Writing Ideas, which contains 31 ideas for writing, so that you can build up a writing habit over the period of a month. Or you can work through it at a slower pace if you prefer. Thank you very much for joining me in this lesson. I look forward to seeing you in the next one, and in the meantime, happy writing.